The night was supposed to be ordinary. A quiet drive home, a moment of peace before the baby arrived. But for Maya Thompson, the city's first black female mayor, everything changed in an instant. Flashing red and blue lights filled her rearview mirror. A simple traffic stop, she thought. But as she pulled over, something felt off. The officer approached aggressively, his hand hovering over his holster. Maya kept her hands visible, her heart pounding. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. She hesitated. "Is there a problem, officer?" His response was swift and forceful. Within seconds, she was being yanked from the car, her stomach tightening with fear. She tried to explain, but he wasn't listening. He didn't see a mayor. He didn't see a woman carrying life. He saw something else. And before she could utter the words that might have stopped everything, it was already too late. Maya hit the pavement, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. Pain shot through her side, but fear outweighed it. The officer's voice was sharp, demanding, "Stop resisting." But she wasn't resisting. She was trying to breathe, trying to speak. She started, but he cut her off, pressing her arms behind her back. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists. The street was quiet, yet she felt exposed, vulnerable. How did it come to this? Just hours ago, she had been in a city council meeting, discussing policies meant to prevent situations like this. The irony stung. She had spent years fighting for justice, for accountability. Now she was the one fighting to be seen, to be heard. A crowd was forming, murmurs of confusion and concern filling the air. And then finally someone recognized her. A voice cut through the chaos. "Wait, do you know who she is?" The officer hesitated for a split second, his grip still firm on Maya's wrists. The crowd around them grew, whispers turning into murmurs, murmurs into shouts. A young woman pulled out her phone, recording everything. Maya's breath was shallow, her pulse racing. The baby kicked, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. She turned her head, forcing herself to stay calm. "Officer, listen to me," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. But he wasn't listening. His training, his assumptions, his fear had already decided who she was. Another officer arrived, glancing between Maya and his partner. His face shifted, realization creeping in. "Wait," he muttered, lowering his voice. "It's this." The first officer scoffed. "I don't care who she is." But the crowd did. A man in a suit stepped forward, his expression one of shock and anger. "That's Mayor Thompson." Silence fell. The officer's grip loosened, and Maya, still on the ground, watched the power shift before her eyes. The officer's face paled, but his grip remained firm. His jaw tightened as he glanced at his partner, then back at the crowd. The murmurs grew louder, the weight of their stares pressing in on him. The young woman's phone was still recording, and more people had joined, their cameras pointed directly at him. Maya swallowed hard, her body aching, her mind racing. She could see the battle in his eyes, the split-second decisions, the pride, the fear of what came next. If he let go now, what would that mean? If he doubled down, what would happen to her, to the baby? The second officer stepped forward cautiously. "We need to call this in," he said under his breath. "Now." But the first officer shook his head, his fingers twitching. "She was resisting," he muttered, his voice unsure now, almost defensive. Maya locked eyes with him. "I wasn't." Her voice was steady, controlled. "But you still have a choice." A tense silence followed, thick and heavy. And then, in the distance, more sirens. Someone had already made the call. The approaching sirens grew louder, flashing lights bouncing off the buildings. The officer's grip finally loosened, but Maya still couldn't move, her body tense, her wrists sore from the cuffs. The second officer spoke into his radio, his voice urgent but controlled. The crowd pushed in closer, their voices rising with anger and confusion. A woman stepped forward. "You put your hands on a pregnant woman, on the mayor?" The first officer's face was unreadable now, his eyes darting between Maya and the growing sea of witnesses. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Mayor Thompson." A deep, commanding tone came from behind the officers. A man in a dark suit stepped out of an unmarked car, his presence shifting the energy instantly. The officers stiffened. Maya recognized him immediately. Chief Reynolds, the man she had once trusted, the same man who had assured her months ago that this kind of incident wouldn't happen under his watch. But as he stepped closer, his expression wasn't one of concern. It was something else, something colder. And that's when Maya realized this wasn't just a mistake, it was something bigger. Maya's breath caught in her throat as Chief Reynolds approached, his sharp gaze shifting between her and the officer who had thrown her to the ground. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. The first officer took a step back, finally releasing his grip. "She wasn't complying," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Chief Reynolds didn't react right away. Instead, he crouched beside Maya, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You need to let this go," he said, his tone smooth, practiced. "For your own good." Maya's stomach turned. This wasn't just about one officer's mistake. It was deeper, more calculated. She saw it now, how the policies she had been fighting to change weren't just being ignored. They were being protected. The sirens faded as more officers arrived. The crowd wasn't leaving, their phones still recording, their voices demanding answers. Maya knew she had a choice: stand up and make this moment count, or let fear silence her. With a deep breath, she pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain. "No," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I won't let this go." And just like that, the real battle began. The crowd fell silent, waiting. Maya stood tall, despite the pain, despite the fear. Cameras captured every second, every expression. Chief Reynolds' face remained unreadable, but she could see the tension in his eyes. He knew this wasn't going away. The officer who had grabbed her took another step back, his confidence shaken. The reality was setting in. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This was a turning point. A reporter pushed through the crowd. "Mayor Thompson, what happens now?" Maya exhaled, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "Accountability," she said firmly. "Not just for me, but for everyone this has happened to." The moment felt bigger than her. It wasn't just about one officer or one night. It was about a system that needed to change. As she turned to face the cameras, she knew this was only the beginning. But one thing was certain: she would not be silenced.